The Empire had conquered 17 star systems in less than a century. Their warships darkened the skies of countless worlds. Their soldiers marched across alien landscapes without fear. The galaxy knew them as the undefeated, the unstoppable, the empire that had never lost a single war. When their scouts discovered the small blue planet called Earth, they laughed at what they found. The humans had barely reached their own moon. Their weapons were primitive. Their ships could not even leave their own solar system. The High Council gathered in their great chamber and decided that Earth would fall within 3 standard rotations. It would be their easiest conquest yet. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Endless Night. Behind him stretched a fleet of 2,000 warships. Each vessel carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. His officers looked at him with pride as they approached the Sol system. This mission was considered a training exercise. Young soldiers needed experience, and crushing a primitive species seemed like the perfect opportunity. The humans detected the fleet when it crossed the orbit of Neptune. Every telescope and sensor on Earth turned toward the approaching armada. World leaders gathered in emergency meetings. Scientists worked without sleep to understand what was coming. The people of Earth watched the skies with fear in their hearts. But something else awakened within humanity that day, something they had never encountered in their long history of conquest. It was not fear that spread across the planet. It was anger, pure and ancient anger. They expected surrender. They expected panic and chaos. They expected the humans to fall on their knees and beg for mercy like every other species before them. Instead, they received a message. A single transmission that made Admiral pause for the first time in his military career. The message was simple. It contained no pleas for peace, no offers of surrender. It simply said, "Come and take it." Admiral smiled when he heard those words. He had crushed prouder species than this. He ordered his fleet forward. The warships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars. They expected to find scattered resistance. Small groups of primitives with weapons that could not even scratch their shields. What they found was something entirely different. Humanity had been fighting wars for 10,000 years. They had fought in jungles and deserts. They had fought in frozen wastelands and burning cities. They had developed the art of killing into a science. While they conquered with overwhelming force, humans had learned to fight with cunning, with rage, and with an absolute refusal to surrender. The first landing ships touched down in the plains of Central Asia. 5,000 soldiers marched out in perfect formation. Their armor gleamed under the alien sun. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy. They expected to face farmers with primitive guns. Instead, they walked into a trap that had been prepared in less than 48 hours. Mines buried beneath the soil exploded upward. Missiles screamed from hidden positions. Attack helicopters rose from behind hills like angry wasps. Human soldiers who had trained their entire lives for war opened fire from every direction. The formation broke within the first hour. Their shields, designed to stop energy weapons, struggled against the kinetic rounds that tore through their ranks. Bullets and shells and rockets found gaps in their armor. Human snipers picked off officers from distances they considered impossible. Admiral received the casualty reports with disbelief. 3,000 soldiers dead in the first engagement. His officers assured him it was a minor setback. They sent a larger force to the eastern coast of a landmass the humans called North America. 20,000 soldiers landed in the Virginia countryside. They marched toward the human capital with confidence. The humans could not possibly stop such a force. The Empire had conquered entire planets with fewer soldiers. They never reached Washington. Human jets screamed overhead, dropping bombs that shattered tanks. Artillery batteries hidden in the mountains pounded their columns without mercy. American soldiers, descendants of warriors who had never lost their homeland to any invader, fought with a ferocity that shocked the alien commanders. Every building became a fortress. Every street became a killing ground. They retreated for the first time in 300 years. News of the defeat spread through the fleet. Soldiers who had never known fear began to whisper among themselves. What kind of species was this? What kind of people could stand against the might of the Empire? Admiral decided to end the campaign quickly. He ordered his ships to bombard human cities from orbit. If the ground forces could not take Earth, he would burn it from above. He would teach these primitives the price of resistance. His weapons officer activated the targeting systems. The fleet's guns charged with enough power to level a continent. Victory was moments away. Then the human counterattack began. Across the planet, underground silos opened. Missiles that humans had built to destroy each other now rose toward the stars. Thousands of nuclear warheads climbed through the atmosphere. They had laughed at human technology, but they had never faced weapons designed by a species that had spent decades preparing to destroy itself. The first wave of missiles struck the fleet before they could react. Nuclear fire bloomed in space. Ships that had survived 100 battles vanished in blinding light. The endless night shuddered as nearby vessels exploded. Admiral screamed orders, but chaos had consumed his fleet. Smaller human rockets rose from submarines in every ocean. Ground-based lasers that humans had secretly developed for this exact scenario tore through fighters. Communication satellites exploded, cutting ships off from each other. In the space of 3 hours, humanity destroyed 800 warships. But the humans were not finished. Engineers had worked through the night on a desperate plan. Cargo ships carrying explosive payloads launched toward the remaining fleet. Drone aircraft filled with fuel crashed into vessels. Commandos using captured alien technology boarded enemy ships and fought room by room, corridor by corridor. One human soldier, a sergeant named Maria Torres, led 12 volunteers onto a cruiser. They killed the crew in close combat and turned the ship's weapons against the fleet. By the time forces retook the vessel, it had destroyed 3 of their own ships. Admiral looked at his tactical display with horror. His undefeated fleet was burning. His soldiers were dying on a planet that should have fallen in hours. He had commanded navies that conquered star systems, and now he was losing to a species that had never traveled beyond its own moon. He ordered a retreat. The remaining ships fled toward deep space. They left behind the wreckage of their pride and the bodies of 60,000 soldiers. As they limped away from Earth, a final message reached them from the planet's surface. Tell your empire what happened here. Tell them what waits for anyone who threatens our home. The empire received the news of their defeat with disbelief that turned to fear. No species had ever fought like this. No world had ever cost them so dearly. The High Council debated for weeks before reaching a decision. They would never return to Earth. They would never speak of this defeat. They would pretend the campaign had never happened. But the galaxy had been watching. Observers from 100 species had seen the fleet approach Earth. They had expected to witness another easy conquest. Instead, they watched the most powerful empire in known space suffer its first defeat in 3 centuries. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. Representatives from every major species demanded to know how this was possible. How could a primitive world defeat the undefeated? The answer spread through the stars like wildfire. Humans were not like other species. They did not fight for territory or resources. They fought for something far more dangerous. They fought for each other, for their families, for their home. They fought with a passion and creativity that the galaxy had never seen. Every human was a warrior. Their artists were warriors. Their scientists were warriors. Their children grew up learning the stories of warriors who came before them. War was woven into their culture, their history, their very souls. The galaxy realized something terrifying that day. Humanity had been fighting itself for thousands of years. They had developed weapons to destroy each other dozens of times over. They had practiced the art of killing with dedication that bordered on obsession. And now they were united. Now they had a reason to look to the stars. Within a decade, human ships began exploring beyond their solar system. They carried weapons that made other species nervous. They traveled with the confidence of a people who had faced the worst and survived. The species that had once been considered primitive were now treated with respect and caution. The empire collapsed within 50 years. Other species, inspired by humanity's example, rose against their conquerors. The empire that had ruled through fear discovered that fear works both ways. Admiral spent his final days writing warnings that no one wanted to hear. He wrote about the blue planet and the impossible species that lived there. He wrote about soldiers who smiled as they charged into hopeless battles. He wrote about a people who would rather die than surrender. His last entry became famous throughout the galaxy. It was studied in military academies on 1,000 worlds. It was quoted by philosophers and historians. It became a warning that echoed through the centuries. They attacked Earth, he wrote. They thought it would be easy. They thought the humans were weak. They thought wrong. Earth is not just a planet, it is a fortress. It is a training ground for warriors. It is the home of a species that turned the art of killing into their greatest achievement. The galaxy witnessed the greatest mistake in history when they attacked that small blue world. We awakened something that should have been left sleeping. May the stars have mercy on anyone foolish enough to threaten them again. The humans read those words with grim satisfaction. They had paid for their victory with blood and sacrifice. They had buried their dead and mourned their losses. But they had proven something that day. They had proven that humanity would never bow, would never break, would never surrender. The stars had new masters now. They walked upright on two legs. They carried the lessons of 10,000 years of warfare. They looked at the infinite darkness of space with hungry eyes. And the galaxy, for the first time in its long history, was afraid of what would happen next.